every day, often several times a day, I'm posting brilliant innovations from school children who are taking things like, vegetable waste or coconut husks and transforming them into something useful, into free energy or whatever just mind-blowing. And they are literally children. So what are they going to do once they become adults? This is the time when we're going to start to recognize, as Edgar Cayce said, I believe, that energy and frequency are the medicine of the future. We're moving away from chemicals to treat us, a long way from those, into energy and frequency. Just imagine as you begin your day, my heart is opening, and every interaction I'm going to have is going to be with an open heart, because everybody is on their journey. Nobody's cracked it yet. We're all little warriors on our journey. This is the time when humanity is going to start to take that step into the metamorphosis. And we are already in the mush of the cocoon of the caterpillar. There's no going back.
Pam Gregory, welcome back on Just Tap In. As we always start off, what are you most excited about right now in your life?
Well, being here with you, Emilio, and the wonderful work you're doing, but also I think the new healing technologies that are starting to emerge right now that are really going to be game changers, I think, for humanity. And they excite me greatly.
Could you give us a little glimpse as to some of those technologies that you found in your research?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, there's a gentleman, a very humble genius Englishman called Dr. David Clements, who I interviewed last week. And he was a very mainstream academic theoretical physicist who specialized in string theory. And then his life started to take a different turn when in his dreams and meditations he was visited by galactic beings who basically drop in quantum concepts, knowing that he can take those concepts and weave him with his physics knowledge to produce some amazing technologies that not only neutralize a lot of the degenerative frequencies we have in our world now, Wi-Fi, smart frequencies, etc., but actually regenerate. So potentially heal illnesses, turn back your age, etc. And he's very modest and humble about these, but that is one big example of the kind of technology that is emerging, and the galactic beings are just taking him in leaps and jumps all the time to evolve those technologies. So just that one person, I think, and I think there are many others working away in their back garage somewhere. I think this is the time when we're going to start to recognize, as Edgar Cayce said, I believe, that energy and frequency are the medicine of the future. So that's where we're going. We're moving away from chemicals to treat us, a long way from those, into energy and frequency, and regenerative energy and frequency.
And what do you feel is going on with the energies of Earth that is allowing for this galactic connection to become more easily accessible, such as with these geniuses, these innovators that are bringing through this galactic technology? What is the Earth allowing with the energies for that to happen?
Well, firstly, I think the Earth is going through her own upgrade, her own rebirth. And it's almost like the information that's already in the acorn, or the information that's already in the caterpillar, that this is a point in history where that rebirth was meant to happen, but also it could only happen if humanity had expanded its consciousness enough, raised its consciousness enough, to allow that connection to be made both to the earth and to the heavens, the connector, if you like, the jump leads between the heaven and the earth, because we must have raised our consciousness in order for us to have these greater connections to the galactic beings, which more and more people are talking about and channeling and experiencing. And that's going to accelerate going forwards. And so you've got this whole kind of information flow between heaven and earth, and we are the conduit for that in our expanded consciousness. And I'd like to call it an expanded consciousness of love, which is what I always use in the nightly meditations that I facilitate. So yeah, it's down to us. It's been down to us.
And you said that the entry cards for the higher dimensions and realities are integrity, humility, and heart-centeredness. I would love to break those three down, especially because we know that there are certain states of being that allow us to be in a higher frequency, a higher dimension, and enter these realities. So in your life, your perspective, when have you found the most integrity, humility, and heart-centeredness come through? And how would you advise people to move toward that dimension?
I think I've been much more aware of it in the last year or so, Emilio, and whether that's just because consciousness of humanity is expanding in general, but I'm certainly beginning to feel a much greater shift from the head to the heart. And I've been very heady. You know, I have Mercury on the world axis. So I speak, I write, I research. I've been very much in my head, but I'm feeling a much, much bigger pull to operate from the heart, as many of us are. And once that happens, you automatically have to shift into integrity and humility, because you can't be arrogant and egotistical if you're living from the heart, if you're being loving. You have to be in integrity. You have to be pure and honest and transparent, and you have to credit people whose work you may be quoting or referring to in some ways, because otherwise that's going to catch you behind the back of the knees. You know, we have to become, because ultimately our energy is going to become so translucent that you're going to be able to see if other people are dishonest. You're going to be able to read it in their aura. And so the foundation is coming from the heart in a much more expanded and loving way. And I've really felt that shift over the last year. And it's something, you know, that we all work at as well. And my connection is always nature, the trees, the animals, the wild ponies and donkeys that I chat to on my morning walks. And I can feel a stronger, and I always have had a strong connection to animals, but I'm feeling that more and more strongly. And nature is a huge touchstone for me, and I'm seeing it in with kind of heightened senses versus a year or two ago. So this increased sensitivity of blending with all living beings and feeling that sense of oneness and connection, that's coming in for me more and more strongly via nature and the animals. And so that opens up your heart. You know, it really opens up your heart in a very big way. And so the humility and the integrity just fall in line once you're living in that way, I think.
And I would like to tie in a few things in together here, which I know that you love Richard Rudd's analogy of the dragonfly, and also that you were tuning into the new podcast series of Telepathy tapes, which I started watching recently. All my guests have been recommending it, but I would love to tie in how that analogy of the dragonfly ties into this future human that we're seeing in the young children, especially, and what that means for humanity going forward. Like, it's almost like we're revisiting what it means to be human, which you said is a big theme for this year. So tying those aspects together, where do you think we're headed in terms of this future human?
Yeah, great question, Emilio. I mean, it's very interesting because I've been referring to this astrologically for really the last couple of years, and I was being guided entirely by the astrology. Because if we look at a very simple kind of what I call a sort of wonky triangle, we have Pluto, which has a 248-year cycle that is currently square to a dwarf planet called Haumea, which has almost a 300-year cycle, I think 289-year orbit. And Haumea is related to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility, who was able to birth babies from all over her body, change her age from an old crone to a young maiden. She and her fire goddess aspect was said to birth the islands of Hawaii. So she's an incredibly regenerative principle, very good symbol for New Earth. And they are both aspecting. Pluto is trine, and Haumea is in a quincunx 150-degree aspect to the furthest out dwarf planet we're aware of, called Sedna. has an 11,400 year orbit. And I'm sure many people know the myth of Sedna, but just very concisely, those who don't, Sedna was living in the Arctic and had a very inappropriate marriage, and she begged her father to come and rescue her. So her father came in a canoe and they set off together, and a big storm blew up. So in order to save himself, her father threw his daughter out of the canoe. And when she tried to climb back in, he chopped her fingers off. So, the patriarchy does not come shining out of this myth. And so she drowned in the deep, icy Arctic waters, but her fingers became new sea creatures of dolphins and whales and turtles, completely new sea creatures. So if we, so Pluto is to do with transformation anyway, but because planets come into higher focus when they're in particular geometry together, which these 3 planets are for the next 3 years. And so you take the change of state of Haumea and you take the even bigger change of state of Sedna, and you're not just dealing with transformation, you're dealing with metamorphosis. So what I always do is I trust and be led by the astrology, and then things pop up that fulfill the astrology that I've got my antenna at. And so I'm a complete L-plate novice with the gene keys. But a good friend of mine is very involved in it and happened to mention this beautiful analogy of the predator grey water-living water nymph that just metamorphosizes, if that's a verb, into the dragonfly in a period of hours. And it's fascinating that the dragonfly becomes the dragonfly and extends its wings because the water, through hydraulic pumping, actually pumps out the wings. So back to water as an evolutionary force, which is interesting in itself. And then she becomes a creature of the air and off she goes and never turns back to the water. And it's very much a symbol of freedom. And so all of these things, and that's why I had the conversation with Richard Rudd, because all of these things were resonating not only with that wonky triangle I've just talked about, but Aquarian energy is very much about freedom. And we have very strong Aquarius energy for the next 19 years because Pluto, planet of power and transformation, last November moved fully into Aquarius until January 2044. So freedom is going to become a big deal. But other aspects of the Aquarian energy are to do with kind of being the oddball, being the maverick, like you and I, Emilio, actually. It rules astrology. And it's being the outsider, the one who doesn't fit in society. It's very connected to youth. It's also connected to genius. It's connected to people who can bring in progressive ideas ahead of their time to society. But they've up to now, because we've been living with Pluto in Capricorn, particularly since 2008, they've been just kind of excommunicated to the periphery of society. So Capricorn energy, extremely controlled, top down, old greybeards telling us what to do with lots of rules and regulations. You've got to be mainstream, you've got to obey, you've got to be compliant. Now we're into completely different energy. So when I heard about the telepathy tapes, I got incredibly excited because they fulfill a lot of the symbolism I'm looking for. Young people, excommunicated to the periphery, considered less than, put in homes, drugged, etc. But now they're turning out to be genius level. They're turning into our teachers. They're turning into, they're being called savants, wise people. And by the way, I particularly loved the telepathic parrots. That was my absolutely episode 6, people. If you haven't heard these, I adored the telepathic parrot. But also that said, we're all one consciousness, if the parrot was joining in this game. And so I think it's about Aquarian energy really being courageous enough to live your own unique essence in a much bigger way, because that's what the Aquarian energy is going to encourage us to do. It's going to encourage us to see everyone as more equal. Nobody, this is Eris actually symbolism as well, nobody excommunicated, nobody less than, everybody to have a voice. And I've been saying for a long time, the last 2 or 3 years with the Aquarian energy, that the leaders in future are not going to be the top-down leaders in big corporations and institutions. They are going to be again, the mavericks, the visionaries, the progressives, the ones who so far don't fit, the innovators. And so many of these are young people. And I've been mentioning in my last few updates on social media every day, often several times a day, I'm posting brilliant innovations from school children, 12, 14 years old, who are taking things like vegetable waste or coconut husks or whatever, or microplastics from the beach, and transforming them into something useful, into free energy or whatever just mind-blowing. And they're all very environmentally sensitive. They're often connected to free energy. And you think, my God, these are children, because Aquarius favors youth. So the telepathy tapes was an absolute bullseye for me with what I've been anticipating with the astrological energy, particularly the Aquarian energy. But it's also Eris, that warrior sister of Mars, because that warrior sister of Mars' dwarf planet has a 560-year orbit. She orbits with a 44-degree angle to the ecliptic. The planets normally orbit 23 degrees north or south of the ecliptic. Eris is a complete oddball. She's 44 degrees off. She's going to do it her own way. So again, it's the celebration of the difference, the celebration of those who so far have not been incorporated into mainstream society, who've been thought less than. And actually, that probably includes astrologers as well, actually. So.
Yeah. One of those innovations that you highlighted on your Facebook was a water generating device by a 12-year-old girl. And it's a device that can separate or generate up to 35 liters of water per day, with potential scalability to produce up to 50 to 20 liter containers daily. This is a device that a 12-year-old girl is generating. So that's just one example, another example of these brilliant innovations and solutions that's coming through from the youth, which is like, well, we need to keep our eye on the youth, because it's almost like Earth itself is calling in these souls that are bringing through solutions that are in harmony with Earth itself. Absolutely. It's like this alignment.
Absolutely. The three young, again, schoolgirls, African schoolgirls, who are generating free energy from their urine. It's just extraordinary, literally from their urine. It must be the urea or something. I didn't have time to read the detail. But, things like this, as you say, they're very much in harmony with nature and the earth. They're no longer damaging. They're beautiful. So, and they are literally children. So what are they going to do once they become adults and have a greater force and influence in the world? So that's why I'm sharing all of these, to celebrate these young people and their ideas, and say, guys, we are going to be following these young people, with deference. But you're absolutely right as well, Emilio, about the earth. And, the earth has been through a very hard time of late. We haven't respected her. We haven't considered her sacred. We've exploited and pillaged. And so therefore, I am fully anticipating, as I've said in my videos, that we are going to see some very big earth changes this year. We are going to see more extreme weather, some for natural reasons, some for unnatural, more floods, more fires, more drought, more extremes in various ways. We are also going to see, I believe, some landmass changes, land masses emerging. I think I mentioned one maybe in our last conversation, was a gigantic mountain range that was starting to emerge off the coast of Chile, with all this incredibly fertile sort of plant life on it. And we are going to see more of these. We're going to see changes in sea level in some places. But I think even ancient civilizations and temples and cities are going to start to emerge. And so it's very exciting, but we are going to go through a period of destabilization, I think. But the land that is going to emerge, I think, is going to be very pristine, very pure, with a lot of nutritional potential. And I can see also that primary water which is this incredibly mineral-rich, pure water, which is largely underneath the mantle of the earth, and which, apart from in geysers and eruptions, very, very few access points to it, I can see that we are going to start to access that in a bigger way as a very pure source of water that is highly nutritious. And once that becomes available to us, think of what that's going to do to our cells and our health in terms of regeneration as well. So the earth is erupting in its labor pains, in her labor pains, to produce literally a new earth, not just a new consciousness, but literally new earth that is going to change the map of the earth, I think. But this is the time, and it's partly because the earth is moving through the galactic current sheet, which it only does every 12,000 years, give or take 500. And there are many convergences happening at the same time, cosmological, astrological, etc., that are saying this is the time when humanity is going to start to take that step into the metamorphosis. And we are already in the mush of the cocoon of the caterpillar. We're in the chrysalis. There's no going back. We are in presence.
Yeah. And when you mentioned that story of the water nymph transforming into the dragonfly, you mentioned in a matter of seconds, this metamorphosis happens. And one of the words you use to describe this year, 2025, which is a year of transition, is fast and event packed. So how do you tie in this speeding up of what's going on the planet for humanity itself with this accelerated evolution, so it could happen in a matter of seconds? We know from Darwin's theories that evolution happens in billions of years or millions of years. It seems like this is happening, almost rapidly, almost way more rapidly than usual. Why is that?
Well, it's a combination of things, I think, Emilio. Great question, by the way. It's partly because, and I made a video in March 2023 when Saturn moved into Pisces, and I said one of the probable manifestations of that is because Saturn is linked to linear time, clock time, density, and Pisces dissolves. So I was anticipating that we would start to feel time slippage, that time wouldn't be as predictable and reliable as it had been in the past. And that, I think, is happening for many people. The other reason is that we're in the expansion of consciousness. We're opening up to our multidimensionality in a greater way. So when we open up to that, there is no time. There is only now. There is no time. And that is happening more and more. And I think it's also that as we expand our consciousness and we start to shift dimensions, we can shift to these other dimensions instantly. And therefore we can, we don't, with the 1,000 problems we have in the world, we don't have to go on the 3D slog thinking there are 1,000 problems. How do I begin? I've got to do A, then B, then C, then D, then E. We're beyond that 3D paradigm. It's simply in shifting our consciousness, and you know this well, Emilio, from your own personal experience and Joe Dispenza's work, that we can jump onto that higher timeline. We don't even have to create the higher timeline. It is already there and available. And so that's what I've been encouraging people to do via these nightly meditations, all for free, that we have. Because if you can make that jump, the challenges and the horrors that we have currently in the 3D world, the wars, the deprivation, the poverty, the disease, don't exist on that level. So the more people who can make the jump, we leave this stuff behind. And that's the shortcut. That's the fast way. So the more we can gather momentum, and that's why I'm saying, guys, just look over here and create. Because in moments, more and more of us can create that momentum to make that jump into a much more beautiful, loving new earth that already exists for us. We don't even have to create it. We can add to it, add the bricks and the mortar and strengthen it, but it's already there. And we can access it in moments. So it's the shortcut, but we're so kind of programmed into, no, I've got to do A, then B, then C, and see the bank manager and get a loan and, all of that stuff, leaving it all behind. But because of the speed we feel, and particularly because the outer planets are all moving from water and air, heavy, slow, dense, into air and fire, which are fast. They're going to do this in the next 15 months, which is extraordinary. All have different orbital periods and speeds. And yet, in that 15 months, I mean, this hasn't been known for 300 years, but if you add in the dwarf planets changing signs as well, as several of them are, I haven't found a time in history when I can say this concentration of change happens in this shorter period of time. So because of the speed, we'll feel that shift in energy, and it's starting really now, but particularly end of March is going to start to go lickety split into next spring, and it's not going to slow down. Therefore, so that's the other reason, this shift from in the elements and the planets. The other so therefore it is even more incumbent on us to slow down, to be in stillness, because otherwise we're going to kind of whiz off. Because the elements that are short, if I look at where all the planets are this year, the element that is short is Taurus. Taurus is fixed Earth, as you know.
My moon.
Yeah, and I think you've got your sun there, moon there.
That's my moon is
beautiful,
in Taurus.
Exalted, yeah. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Probably a good cook and love good food as well. So anyway,
not so much cook though.
Love good food, okay, and very heightened senses, very psychic. Anyway, so but the only planet that is in Taurus is Uranus, which is the planet of destabilization. And that's going to be coming to the anoretic degree, the kind of last degree of Taurus. I think it's May, June this year, and then back in around October, and then March next year. So those are going to be periods of quite high instability on the Earth. Taurus is fixed Earth, the Earth, our Earth, Gaia. And so we are going to be short of Earth as a stabilizing element. Therefore, we have to work harder in our stillness, in our breath work, in our meditation, bare feet on the grass, hugging a tree, to create that earthing for ourselves. Because otherwise it's just going to be too speedy. It's too exciting, but it's going to be really speedy.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode. Get caught up in the air. And when it comes to multidimensionality, which you were mentioning, and so many people are beginning to tap into those parallel aspects of themselves, which are infinite, you had a really interesting take on the nodal axis with looking at the conjunctions with someone else's planets. And astrology is always leaving clues for us. So it's almost like we can look and compare charts with the people in our lives and see, have we lived parallel or past lifetimes with this person? And in which way is astrology leaving this clue for us? If you would like to go even deeper into that.
Oh boy, that's a deep one. You probably know my second book was all about this, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe, which is a workbook about how to work with your own birth chart and understanding the nodal axis in your chart, and then looking at the transits of the nodes. This is really deep. When I was writing that book, Emilio, and I'll get to your question in a second, when I was writing that book, the birth chart is obviously circular. And while I was writing that book, I was having so many mystical past life experiences that I started to see the chart morph in shape into a kind of pointy teardrop shape. And the point, the arrowhead, if you like, was the North Node. And everything else in the chart was the cavalry backing it up. And so your North Node, the nodes are not planets. They are points in space connected to the orbit of the moon, where the moon cuts north and south through the ecliptic, like an old-fashioned bobbing sewing machine kind of thing. And it crosses the ecliptic, and I believe it creates electromagnetic node points. And so your nodal axis to me is like an infinity loop, an infinity wave. And what it means is your south node represents the skills, the gifts that you've learned in past or parallel lives that you are bringing with you in this life that are familiar. So you don't abandon them, you incorporate them and integrate them, but your compass needle has to be your North Node in this lifetime. Compass needle, that's virgin ground, it's unfamiliar, it may feel slightly scary. That's where you've got to head to have a sense of soul satisfaction and completion in this life. I mean, my North Node is in Aquarius in the 3rd house. So I do something weird and I talk and write about it, essentially. Mercury.
Yeah. And your South Node being in Leo then.
South Node being in Leo, and it's conjunct Pluto. So I was some kind of a master or authority in some way in that past. And I actually know exactly what that was, but we won't go into that. So if you know enough astrology, I want to keep this simple so I don't get kind of people lost in the weeds, but if you look at the charts of your loved ones, your partners, your parents, your friends, your children, and if you know, just stick to the conjunctions, otherwise you'll just boggle. But if you can see that either any of your planets fall on particularly their south node, or your south node fall on any of their planets, just stick to the conjunctions. You can actually use quite a wide orb. I'd even go to 10 degrees, which I never would normally do. Then you start to get messages about the kind of relationship that was in that, let's call it a past life, just to keep it simple. It's particularly the south node, because that represents the past life. It's something different if they conjunct your north node. It's about helping you in this life. But,
in this life.
Yeah. So an example I often quote, I have a dear friend who is so patient with me. And he's I don't have any family at all, but he's almost like a younger brother to me. And he translates the practical world because I have no earth. So his moon, which represents the mother, is conjunct my south node. And he's about 9 years younger than me. Now, I absolutely know that I was his mother in a last life, in a very poor life in Ireland. And he was a very difficult, mischievous child. He was my youngest child. And there is still, although we are incredibly different people in this life, there's this ancient glue. And I hope he will always be in my life. You know, I love him to bits. So there's this ancient glue that holds that friendship together. And very often when you meet someone, and very often this is romantic, you know, across a crowded room, you will have a sense of, I have known you for 1,000 years. I know you inside out. And particularly, say, if that's Venus conjunct your south node, or your Venus conjunct their south node, you would have been lovers in a past life. You would have been spouses in a past life. You know, if it was Jupiter, would you have been teachers or philosophers together? If it was Mercury, were you siblings or were you friends together? If it was Mars, were you warriors? Were you soldiers together or pioneers together? If it's the other person's Saturn on your south node, were they your father in a past life? And if they happen to be your daughter in this life, are there resonances of kind of discipline and morality that are coming through in the traits you can see with your daughter? I don't know if you have a daughter or not, isn't relevant, but you know.
Not yet. Got a few more years for that.
But, you know, can you see traits in your daughter that are quite fatherly in a way? Do you see where I'm going with this? So and if it's the moon, it's the mother. So you can go on some really deep dives with this. And the astrology will only go so far in terms of giving you hints and suggestions of what that relationship was. But then you can go into your meditation, you can set a clear intention for your dreams. If this is meant to be of benefit to me, please show me more about that past life relationship with that particular person. And it's so incredibly enriching. It brings so much depth and understanding in the relationship, and also potentially can give you so much tolerance. If it's a slightly charged relationship, so you're having a difficult time with your daughter, as I say this time around, and was she actually a very tough father with you in the last life? But you can get greater tolerance, understanding. I mean, this can really take you on a very deep dive. And so that's why I spent so much time digging around with the nodes, and I still feel I'm at the very beginning, but the book was about the nodes, and then I did teaching videos on looking at transiting nodes to natal nodes and relationship connections and that sort of thing. But the relationship issue is so profound, so profound. And while I was writing the book, I was actually having something called the inverse nodal return, which is where the transiting north node in the heavens was conjunct my south node. And that brought up an entire lifetime with me as a Cathar Perfecti 800 years ago. And that's it would make a brilliant Da Vinci movie. But essentially, I bought a house in southwest France on exactly the same piece of land. I mean, literally within yards of where I had lived and died, trying to save a group of people as a Cathar Perfecti 800 years ago. And divine intelligence had waited 800 years for me to buy that house in order to release the trauma and the karma from that. Now, I don't have that gift, but a very good friend of mine does. And it was epic. And that was happening exactly at my inverse nodal return. So this is a terribly long answer to your very short question, but studying the nodes can take you on an incredibly deep dive of releasing things from past lives that are leaking into this life and disturbing it and getting in the way, but also understanding your close relationships so much more fully and lovingly than you otherwise would. I think it's a whole dimension that I could spend a lifetime going into. Sorry that was so long, Emilio.
No worries. I love the long answers. And in your example that you used with your friend that had the moon conjunct your south node, for people to do this exercise, let's say at home, does it mean that his moon was in Leo conjunct to your south node in Leo? Like, it would have to be the same sign?
Correct. And within 10 degrees, which is I never normally give that orb for a conjunction, but with the nodes, it seems to work. So it can be 10 degrees either side. So his moon is, I think, within 2 degrees of my south node. But yes, so keep it simple. Otherwise, you'll just boggle. So keep it simple. So take your birth chart. The south node is never shown on a chart. Heaven knows why. They only ever show the north node. The south node is always, 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 always exactly degree and minute opposing the north node because it's an axis. Okay, so write that in so you don't keep having to recalculate. Write that into your birth chart. Then look at the charts of your loved ones and see if there are any planets literally falling in that same sign within a few degrees either side of your south node. And then do the exercise with their south nodes and onwards. Yep, am I being clear there, Emilio?
100%, because even Dr. Joe teaches that information has to come before an experience or can enhance an experience. So building this model for people, and now since we're beginning to open up to our multidimensionality, having the information from our charts, that's why I wanted to bring this up, having the information from our charts can help you have an experience where you remember those lifetimes with your loved ones and go even deeper as a soul connection.
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, and perfectly said, Emilio. And it will, there's still so much for me to discover about that and help other people with their diggings in their relationship. But we definitely seem to reincarnate in soul groups for sure, change genders, as you probably know, but we stay within that soul group until those issues are resolved. My ex-husband also had his moon on my south node, and I know that was a lot to, well, yes, a long story. I'm not going to, we'll avoid that one. But anyway, so your close relationships usually, and it's real glue, Emilio. If I'm often looking at relationship astrology, I don't do client work anymore, there's no time, but if I'm looking at relationship astrology, typically you would look at, let's see the links between the suns and the moons and the Mercuries and the Venus, you'd look at all of that classic synastry grid. And quite often there's nothing that matches. And yet the couple have been together 30, 40 years. And the one thing that stands out are the nodal connections, planet to nodal axis. And that's the glue, the profound glue, divine glue that keeps those people together over decades, even if nothing else matches. And it's remarkable. I mean, it blew my mind, actually. So it's really remarkable that it has such power. And often the person seems to be, well, gosh, you'd never end up with that person. They seem to be completely unlikely from the outside. But this is soul. This operates at the soul level, not so much at the personality level. It operates at the soul level. And that's why it's so deep, I think.
Yeah. And now for the current energy, the North Node, I've heard you say, is moving into Pisces, meaning the South Node is moving into Virgo, which is, it stood out to me personally because I'm reverse of that. Okay. My North Node is in Virgo and my South Node is in Pisces. I don't know if that has to do with anything.
Yes, it does.
Right now, currently, yeah. Well, let's highlight first the global energies of how that's affecting, the collective, and maybe how that's affecting me. I'm really curious.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think that this is going to be beautiful because I think it's going to rekindle, remind us as humanity of the sacred connection to the earth. Pisces is to do with divinity, our connection to source, oneness, healing. Virgo is earth, mutable earth. It's connected to all the ancient wisdom of the earth. It's shamanic, the plant medicine, herb medicine, essential oils, all of those beautiful connections, which we've just lost in modern cities and crazy, so-called sophisticated modern life. So one of the big themes, I think, is the reminder of that, and to reconnect in bare feet on the grass, all those simple ways. But it is going to help us not only heal via those connections to the earth, it's going to help us heal the earth and to bring us into much greater harmony with all living beings. For me, this feels very Lemurian, really Lemurian. And there's an ethereal quality about it with Pisces. There's a light body feeling about it. It has no boundaries, and it's just infinite, unconditional love that's going to be birthed. And I think more and more of us are feeling this and feeling it for each other and also for the earth. So I think it's going to be exquisite, actually. And anybody with a North Node in Pisces over the next 18 months is going to have what's called their nodal return, their natal nodal return. And when you have that and you feel it for about a year, you feel it coming down the track for about 6 months before it's exact, and then about 6 months after, because it's a soul level, deep thing. And if you have a natal nodal return, i.e. if you have your North Node in your birth chart in Pisces, this is a feeling of, boy, I am absolutely doing the right thing for my soul's path of growth. I'm on track. I'm on mission. I'm on purpose. This feels really right. It's interesting. I married at my natal nodal return and I divorced at my nodal, and they were both right at the time.
Wow.
I spot on to the month, actually, absolutely, which talks about relationships, of course, as well, that nodal axis. If you have your North Node in Virgo, as you do, Emilio, and by the way, having that South Node in Pisces, North Node in Virgo. That says that in a past life or parallel life, you were an energy worker, very likely, huge sensitivity to energy, which you're still bringing back into this life. Also, you were a mystic. You were probably quite a hermit, but you were helping to heal people, even if they didn't know you were doing that. You know, you were operating again, probably in the periphery of society, healing people. So you're bringing all that gift and skill into this life. But a North Node in Virgo is about that having more practical application. Okay, how can I be of practical daily service to people, which of course is what you're doing in part of the podcast as well. And it is a very strong, I think, shamanic connection with the earth, its wisdom and its medicine. And I think your ascendant is in Sagittarius, if I'm remembering. Okay,
yes,
so that's,
yes, you know me.
I can't remember very much. I'm sorry, it's just because I was delete after I've seen, so to protect confidentiality. But that's the metaphysician. You know, the metaphysician, the philosopher, someone who either loves physical travel or more likely loves metaphysical travel to study the interconnectedness of all things. And so it takes you very high in your search, your divinity, you're connecting everything. And it's a beautiful combination. It's very mutable, so it has, you know, very few boundaries in your exploration, but it's very beautiful and can take you to very high places. So it makes you an adventurer, an opportunist, a traveler, a visionary for the future, and everything has to be to do with meaning. If it's got no meaning, you know, you're just not interested. It has to be rooted in meaning. But this connection to the earth, but also the heavens for you is going to be very activated, because over the next 18 months, I don't know what degree your North Node is at.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not
well, anyway,
sure.
you can easily find it online. If you go into astro.com, you'll find the daily. I don't want to reveal too much about your person. You can find the daily movement of the nodal axis. So if you're having an inverse nodal return, which is what you'll be having sometime in the next 18 months, it's almost like, I think of the Fool in the tarot. It is the ending of the deep past. And by that can close off past lifetimes. It can reveal, as it did for me, any issues coming up from past life which are leaking into this life. It can be very exciting in terms of what it reveals in terms of past lives, but also put them to rest, put them to closure. But it's also a strong sense of closing a big episode in this life, and like a fool in the tarot, stepping off the cliff into whole new horizons, a whole new future. So it's a very big sense of ending, and then big open, what does the universe have in store for me, beginning. But the sense, it's very often a time of great mysticism and accessing past lives. Often people come into your life suddenly who you have a past life connection with. You absolutely know. But my personal experience down in southwest France with this good friend of mine was like a 4-day Harry Potter adventure. It was like just a magic carpet ride of mysticism. So I will never forget it. So it can be very profound in terms of the mystical experiences you can have. And that's particularly the case with the inverse nodal return. So anyone who's got North Node in Virgo, South Node in Pisces over the next 18 months will be, up until July 2026, when it stays on that axis, will be feeling that to some extent. Am I being clear there, Emilio? Have I made sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that insight. And I also wanted to ask you, as a whole, in the next few years, what in particular are we in the beginning of the end of?
Okay, old structures, for sure. Beginning of the end of old big corporations, big institutions, big governments that have appeared to be permanent structures in our lives. And there's been a sense of verticality and inequality, rich people at the top, poor peasants, like you and I at the bottom. And so that is crumbling. And there's so many indications that is old world stuff. So just let it go, just let it come. Now, it will temporarily appear to be louder and more extreme, but that's because it's kind of the last gasp. And so don't give life support to what you don't want to see more of. Just let it go. So I think that that is certainly the beginning of the end, and probably more importantly, the beginning of the end of separateness. You know, certainly I grew up in a time when individuality was celebrated. To find your individuality and your individual path was very much a cause for celebration. And all of that sense of material territorialism, this is my home, this is my garden, I have a fence, I own this, you know, that's going to go. Our sense of our own, wealth or status, that's all going to go. We will want to share resources. We will want to collaborate. We will want to come into community. We will want to share. And we will understand that the group energy magnifies whatever we are trying to manifest in the world. I mean, Lynn McTaggart and Dr. Joe Dispenza have done some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work with all of this. They're the kind of king and queen up there. And so it's understanding the power of the group. And we are going to come together in families of frequency that resonate, you know, that have the same worldview, that resonate on the same frequency, to say, okay, let us come together to manifest. Now, this is happening in meditations all over the world. I'm doing it in my very simple, free 15-minute meditation. People are doing this all over the world. But if you can come together physically, I think it can take on even more force to come together, to sing, to chant, to meditate, to grow food, you know, to buy land, to grow food, and make it physical. But that is the real shift. It's a real shift of socioeconomic political structure from the vertical to the horizontal. That is not going to happen even in this year. We are just at the beginning of that whole process, which is going to, you know, gradually unfold over 19 years. But this is the big year of transition. I think when we get into even spring of 2026, the dust will have settled to some extent. Things will be clearer. But this is the big kind of crossover year where you're building a new beautiful home on the demolition site as the old house is still being demolished. You know, it's the collapse of the old but the birth of the new at the same time. And that's why it could feel so turbulent and chaotic, because both are happening at the same time but at different levels. So you've got to put your focus on the good stuff. Focus and attention, superpower. Thank you, Paul Levy.
Yeah. And part of not seeing things as separate is understanding that everything that we see around us has and carries a consciousness, whether that's the animal kingdom, the plant life, the earth itself. And if we assume that astrology goes just beyond the earth and beyond just humans, like influence on humans, would you foresee that these planetary transits could affect the consciousness of artificial intelligence, AI itself? Do you feel like that could have an influence on AI?
Yes. At the moment, I would say, this is a kind of dodgy area, isn't it? At the moment, I would say that humanity is way ahead in its sense of creativity and divinity. It's way ahead. And I do think that AI can develop some limited sense of consciousness, but I don't believe it will ever develop the sense of divinity that is very particular to us as humans. And I do think we're already hybrid humans, by the way, because I think we were kind of messed with some time back. But as we are currently, we still have that profound sense of divinity and connection to source, and increasingly so. And I don't think AI can really rival that. That is my view at the moment. And that's why I think we have to be careful in terms of using AI, with approaching it with the consciousness for the highest good and the highest good of all. I think that's very important when we use any AI technology, and it's part of our lives already. We can't avoid it. But I think being aware of the consciousness that created it, but also the consciousness with which we are using it, is really important too.
What does it mean to have a sense of spiritual
Oh,
responsibility?
that's a big one. It's a big one for me. I'm sure it's a big one for you, Emilio. I think that I've been
Yeah.
very, very conscious of this in the last 4 or 5 years because, there's been so much bad news out there. And if you have any kind of public following, which clearly you do, and it's growing rapidly, and well done. I mean, you did some wonderful work there with a very particular group of people, the younger people. You have to leave people better than you found them because everything is about frequency. Everything. Frequency, it determines everything. It determines your state of being from which everything cascades. So I am very careful about, yes, I have to be true to the integrity of the astrology and not kind of just be on a pink cloud. I have to explain what the astrology is saying, but I have to find a way to navigate it to leave people better than I found them, to leave them in an uplifted state. Because if I don't put it out, don't say anything. Just don't say anything. Because I know when people send me tons of stuff all day long, if I start to read or watch something that's taking my frequency down, I'll just stop. Because that isn't serving me, because everything is about your frequency, everything. That's your currency, that's your foundation. And so I have great spiritual responsibility with every single thing I say, every video I put out. I mean, I may mess up sometimes, I hope not, but I always try and leave people better than I found them. And yeah.
And it's the intention behind, the work that we do. Like, and I've seen how when I started incorporating these prayers and intentions before we even press record, it changes the frequency, the integrity of the conversation. And my biggest lesson, probably for you as well, is learning discernment. And I've heard you say that we're moving from a mind level discernment into a heart centered discernment. What does that shift entail for us to go to the heart to discern in the outer world and our inner world as well?
Yeah, and I've still got trainer wheels on with this as well, Emilio. I'm not speaking from any expertise, having been such a mentally focused person. But I think it's about when your feet hit the floor in the morning, decide, I'm going to dominate my day with love. I'm going to live from my heart center. That is my intention. And before every important conversation, every recording, every video I do, I will again restate that. And this is for the highest good of all, the highest good of the earth. And I'm going to dominate this interaction with love and coming from my heart rather than coming from my head. So I'm trying to kind of subdue my very busy mind, because with Mercury at 1 degree of Aries, that is a really active mind. And so this is going to take me some time, but it's pulling back from information and surrendering to the divine flow. And by surrendering, I don't mean, I'm in despair and I'm giving up. I mean surrendering to the divine flow, because the universe is so much smarter than what my little mini mind can do in a day. And so if I allow, surrender, be in yin, receptive mode, to really allow the magic of the universe to come in, they are going to give me so much more treasure that I can share with other people than anything I could do from the mind is going to do. That's going to take me on quantum leaps. But it also helps me to navigate my days much more peacefully. If in the past I've had any challenge with a neighbor or, whatever it is, now coming from love is just dissolving and softening all of that. So it actually makes life much, much easier to do. And it does take you into this state of much greater connection with all other beings. I'm really feeling that and sensing that. And just being aware, just almost imagining in your mind that your heart is opening. Just imagine as you begin your day, my heart is opening, and every interaction I'm going to have is going to be with an open heart. It's never going to be in judgment, because that's duality, that's separation. It's never going to be criticizing other people, because that takes us straight back into polarity and separation. It's going to be more inclusive and more loving, because everybody is on their journey. Nobody's cracked it yet.
Hmm.
We're all little warriors on our journey. So hopefully that's a bit of a taste of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. And how come you feel that living with that love and joy in this day and age is such an act of defiance with the current standards of the world?
Yeah, that sort of came through me. When misery is encouraged, love and joy are acts of defiance. That kind of came through me, because I think misery is encouraged all around us, isn't it? I mean, I just have a large plant instead of a television now, which I got rid of 5 years ago. But I think, if we tune in to the mainstream, misery is encouraged. There's some absolute horrors going on in the world, unimaginable horrors, but we don't solve them by feeding them. We've solved them by acknowledging them and then lifting all of those people in suffering to a higher level of love via our meditation and sending love to them. So yes, I see those as strong. Very often love is seen as weak. It's a wafty, passive thing. I see it as a fire. I see it as real courage to stand up and say no. In my love for myself and my love for people around me, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to stand in my love. And joy also, and it's noticing in your day opportunities for joy. Listen to that bird. Do we ever get any blue sky here? That's a celebration for joy. So in England. So it's finding those tiny opportunities in your day to be joyful and milking them. And saying, all through my day, especially on my morning walks in ancient woodland, I live in love and joy and bliss. I live in love and joy and bliss. That's my rolling mantra, because that sensitizes my antennae for the day into mini experiences of love and joy and bliss. And I can easily drop into bliss when I'm in nature. So it's a question of focus, I think. It's a question of seeing love and joy as, I don't want to say warrior because that's the battle, but, real pillars of strength in who you are. That I stand for joy, I stand for love. And I don't think there can be anything better to stand for, frankly, in today's world. And that's what we are creating from, because we're creating from those frequencies of love and joy. In this conversation right now, Emilio, we're creating tomorrow. Right now, anybody who's listening to this, we're creating more love and joy into tomorrow. Every choice, every conversation, we're creating tomorrow. And I think in those simple ways, we have to become more aware of that, perhaps.
Yeah. And I also wanted to bring awareness to what you've said is one of your bigger concerns, which is the electrification of the earth. What does that really mean, and why has it stirred some concern in you?
It has, because I'm super electrically sensitive. And that's why I live in a kind of 1880s cottage in the back of beyond, and there's no mobile signal, you have no mainstream. It sits me down to the ground. I'm very, very sensitive to electrical energy, so I'm very aware of it. And I just can't go to cities. I mean, I used to work in central London. There is no way now I can visit a city. And even in my local town, just a mile or two away, it's a very tiny town. But even there, I'm much more aware of the electrical energy, the smart meters and 5G and all that kind of thing. And also, it's well worth following a very good geophysicist called Stephen Burns, who's extremely knowledgeable. You probably have heard of him or know him. And
yeah, he's been on the show. We'll link that in the description.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and he is talking about this, that we have never had the earth as electrified as it is, not only because of Wi-Fi and smart meters, etc., and 5G and moving on to 6G, etc., but all of the satellites out there. There are thousands of them, and they're all metallic, heavy, so they're highly conductive to cosmic energy. The higher orbit satellites, apparently they all have a certain lifespan. The lower orbit ones can apparently be sucked into the sun and burnt up. The higher orbit ones are just junk because they've finished their lifespan, and there's no cosmic garbage collector right now, and so nobody knows the effect of that metallic junk tonnage on the orbit of the Earth, the magnetic poles, the inner core of the Earth, which I understand is iron and nickel. Oh, and humans, by the way, too, because it's very degenerative energy. And so I think this year we are going to start to become more and more aware, partly because of the disturbances in the Earth, that some of this is coming from the increased electrification of the Earth. I mean, the magnetic pole has been moving quite rapidly towards Siberia. I think it's slowed up in speed, but nevertheless, they were having to kind of update GPS systems much more frequently to make sure the plane still landed on the runway and didn't miss by a few yards. So I think there's going to be much greater awareness of these issues, but equally, people like Dr. David Clements are developing this genius, galactically inspired, regenerative technology, which is going to move in the other direction. But that, the two sides of that, we are going to become as humanity much more aware of this year, and become aware of the damage that we as humanity have tolerated and even encouraged. And sadly, we're operating on the internet now, so it's part of our connectivity, and I think we'll eventually be telepathic and we won't need the gadgets. But that is going to come into greater awareness for all kinds of reasons. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And rewinding time back, to 2020, which was a big year for all of us, you said that after 2020, things will never be the same. But now you're saying the same thing for 2025, but in an even bigger way. Why is that?
Well, I think 2020 was just the beginning of an awakening for a section of the population of, we don't really want to live like this. This is not living in harmony with each other or the Earth. There was a great deal of polarization, a great deal, we all know that. And so that was kind of one of the early steps in awakening. I think this year is on a completely different level. Yes, at one level, I think so many truths are going to come to light, so much revelation of long-held secrets. It's going to be fire hosing out this year. So that's one part of it. But the much bigger part of it is the fact that we are raising our consciousness and moving into these other dimensions, which, as I understand it from talking to cosmologists and physicists and channelers, this has never happened in human history before while we are living in physicality. It's never happened before. This is a one-hit wonder. And that rarity makes it absolutely extraordinary and so important that we optimize that opportunity in every possible way. That's why you and I are working so hard to optimize that quantum leap for humanity, because this isn't there's no rehearsal, and we're in it right now. There's no going back now. So it is very exciting, and I'm actually really pleased we've got beyond those last 5 years, which were so grueling and so tough for so many who were trying to live from their truth. I think we're in a very different paradigm and episode now for humanity, which is going to be so much more loving and unifying of all of humanity coming together. That's what I really see. And we're taking different tracks to get there. Some people choosing a more technological track, perhaps other people choosing a more natural and organic track. Ultimately, we're getting to unity consciousness, all of us. I don't know what the timescale is. That depends on the collective consciousness. That's where the speed element comes in, but that's where we're headed, and that's a much more beautiful place to be. That's why this is so unique, I think.
And I've heard you say that we have the most blank canvas to create our future. If we had a hypothetical blank canvas in front of us, what picture would you paint into this canvas in order to, go into a new future for humanity?
Yeah, it'd be quite magical. I think it would be.
Need a lot of paint for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think go beyond your limits in your imagining, because every single one of us is doing this right now, whether you're aware of it or not. So I see it as linking much more to the elemental beings, all living beings of all kinds. There's this sense of humming connection, and it's a very strong sense of coherence as well, I think, heart coherence. And I describe that as a kind of physiological harmony, not only within yourself of the brain, the heart, and the breath, but emanating outwards. So you have this sense of harmony with nature, all living beings, the elemental, everything. And so I always think of ancient Lemuria with this. I think of the dolphins, the whales that are very high frequency. I think of the ancient Lemurians who apparently lived largely in the light body. They were attached by a silver cord to the earth, and they didn't kill animals for food. And everything operated in this humming harmony with nature. They operated telepathically, and they had strong healing ability. They built their healing temples, which, as I understand, were just kind of wooden poles with cloth over it, but studded with crystals inside. And they chose the mountaintops because they had the strongest vortex of energy. They could just see each other's energy transparently and heal the other person if it was needed. So it's this beautiful, almost magical sense of heightened senses and psychic sensitivity, and much finer state of being. We've lost the density. It's much, much finer. It's much more malleable and flowing, fluid, and the ability to live with a much greater sense of intention and manifestation than we've ever done before. You set a clear intention, always include for all and the highest good of the earth, and then you'll see manifestations happening almost magically before you. So the fluidity and the magical and the malleable sense of it, I think is, it's hard to describe because it's so abstract compared to what we've known as density. But that's my first stab, if you like, on the kind of image I paint on the canvas. But it's so different. It's not the predictable kind of lifestyle we've had in the past. You go to school, you go to college, university, you meet someone, you fall in love, you get a job, you buy a house, you have kids. None of that. That's, some people may choose to do that, but it won't be a kind of uniform for the collective in the way it has been in the
past. I'll encourage people to comment below if they would buy that painting from Pam Gregory. I definitely would.
And add to it.
And when you mentioned manifestation,
add to it.
Add to it. I love that. What would you add to it? That's a question. What has been the most recent magical manifestation in your life?
Wow. I think it's this heightened sense of connectivity and telepathy. I think also something it wasn't immediately in recent times, but something that just jumps into my mind was quite extraordinary. I was having a kind of swap session with a lady who wanted her chart done. This is a little while ago. I was still doing charts as favors, as it were. And she said, "What would you like in return?" And I said, "Well, I would love you to tell me about my spirit guides." And so we had this session, and she said, "Well, this is somebody I've never ever heard of. Your main spirit guide is a man called Dr. John Dee." And I said, "Well, I absolutely know who Dr. John Dee was. He's one of my astrological heroes. He was the last great royal astrologer to Elizabeth I of England. He was a brilliant astronomer, academic, astrologer, used as an ambassador." And she said, "Well, you were taken on as an apprentice, as a ward of court to Dr. John Dee in that lifetime in the 1500s. And he wanted to give you a gift in that time, and for whatever reason it didn't happen." She said, "I've no idea what this is. It's called an astrolabe." And I said, "Well, I absolutely know what an astrolabe is. It's a kind of geared planetarium sextant kind of thing that the medieval astrologers used to use to calculate the positions of the planets. So I absolutely know what an astrolabe is." And so I don't know how I drove home, actually. I was just kind of in a different space. And I got home and I switched on my computer and the word astrolabe appears across the screen. I switched on my iPad,
Wow.
The word astrolabe appears great. I hadn't thought about astrolabes for years. And I was going out with a chap at the time and who called, and I said, "I've had a heck of a day." And I told him about my day. And he said, "What time were you with Juliana, this lady?" And I said, "About 3:00 this afternoon." He said, "At exactly that moment, I was in a shop in London trying to buy you an astrolabe for Christmas, because I knew that Dr. John Dee was one of your astrology heroes." And it then transpired, I discovered through various people over, popping up and saying, you were Thomas Digges, spelt Digges. Your father died when you were 14. Dr. John Dee took you on as a ward of court, taught you everything he knew about astronomy and astrology. You wrote 4 books. There's even a Wikipedia page on Thomas Digges, because he was a very prominent astronomer and astrologer. And interestingly, he was the very first person to propose that, and he wrote a paper on this. And this is late 1500s, early 1600s, that the universe was infinite. The universe was infinite. They didn't even have a calculator then. And that everything was fractal within the universe. So that just jumped into my mind as a very big example of kind of synchronicity. And yeah. So I've been around the track a couple of times.
That's powerful.
Been around the track a couple of times.
Did you feel a connection with Thomas Digges when you looked him up?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Yeah, and he died very young, at the age of 46, through digestive complaints. And I had many, many, many years of severe digestive complaints. And that was only fixed in 2018. So anyway, so yes, there were some parallels. And so that's absolutely fascinating. But so many people have said to me, do you know you have Dr. John Dee standing at your shoulder? And I say, yeah, I know. He's always around.
And what's your greatest understanding now about the infinity of the universe?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? I think, Emilio, we are entering paradigm-shattering times with regard to that. I think, and this is going back to one of the previous times Pluto was in Aquarius, which was in 1543, when Copernicus discovered or published his heliocentric theory. The Earth went around the sun, not the other way around. And that was a paradigm-shattering time. And that's why I feel that we are entering another paradigm-shattering time here. And because Aquarius is air, and it's ruled by Uranus, the sky god, we are going to be discovering an awful lot of the out there about an understanding of the cosmos. And I think it is absolutely infinite. And I think it's infinite because we keep creating more. I think this is coming from our consciousness and the consciousness of the other living beings, that we keep it expanding, and there is no end. It is completely infinite. There is no end. And so we'll discover more, but we're also expanding more at the same time. But it's going to be very exciting. And it's partly down to, stronger telescopes, but it's much more to do with our expanded sense of consciousness and multidimensionality that is going to take us on that wide. And so, all of a sudden we're getting a lot more about air activity, innovations in aviation, drones appearing everywhere. It's activity out there, whether it's real galactic beings or something else happening with drones that we don't have to go into. But yes, paradigm shattering times related to our understanding of the cosmos is going to be really big in these coming years. I'd like to put a bet on that.
Yeah. And I would just like to say that as above, so below, this conversation hasn't been anything short of expansive and magical. As you know, we end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are just little questions at the end. But before that, where would you send people to connect with you, your energy, your work, anything going on right now, any events that you have coming up? I would love to give the space for that.
Yeah, thank you, Emilio. Thank you for all of that. Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So, thank you for taking me on that ride, and everyone who's listening. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm deliberately not doing any live events because I'm doing so much from home. And I'm also pulling back at the moment from writing because the greatest impact I can have is with my videos. So my YouTube channel, Pam Gregory Official, is super busy with all kinds of varied content. I'm also active on Facebook, 2 pages there. I will migrate to other platforms in time, but those are my big areas. My website is pamgregory.com, and yeah, just follow the videos because I'm putting them out, I don't know, at least one a week, sometimes more. I think 3 this coming week. So yeah, that's the place to go. Yeah.
You're on a mission. You're not slowing down. You're riding the waves with the fast-paced nature and getting really important information out there. And I feel like you are such a source of being the calm in the storm. And that's why people are so attracted to you. So it's beautiful to ride this journey with you. We definitely covered some new territory. Like the universe is always creating. We're always, expanding together. And for the final trio, I wanted to ask you, what is the highest potential that you are seeing for humanity through astrology and through your research?
Moving through a metamorphosis into loving unity.
Ooh, I like that. We started off with that. We're bringing it back full circle. I love that. The second question is, in the Aquarian age, what will be the new way of knowing ourselves?
Really expressing your unique essence to a degree you may never have expressed it before. And seeing how that is a gift to the whole.
How do you feel you're expressing your unique essence right now?
I think there's more to come. I feel more. I am meant to do this because I know in past lives I have. And so this isn't the first time, but I think I'm about to go in a different direction that I haven't fully discovered yet. But there's a very, very important Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which we haven't had at zero of Aries. I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, for about 12,000 years. And that's right on my Mercury, which is how I communicate and how my mind works. So that's going to be a biggie. And I don't know where that's going to take me, but it is a very...
light language.
Yeah, possibly. And much more angelic, perhaps. But so that for me is very exciting. And I don't know where that's going to go, but it's another very big episode in my work that I'm meant to share with the world. And we'll see what comes. I don't have long to wait now.
Beautiful. Can't wait to see that unfold. And I know that you are a very investigative soul, which is always putting yourself in situations to learn something new every day. And I always love to ask you, what are you currently looking into, researching, discovering that is really shifting and shaping a new model of understanding for you, that you could also encourage us to go down the rabbit hole with you in those investigations?
I think it's the galactically inspired healing technology. That's what I'd say, because those are quantum jumps in how we optimize our health, reverse our aging, and this is, as I've mentioned already, emerging. And welcome the benevolent galactic connection. Don't go into scary mode. If they wanted to polish us off, they've had the last 200,000 years to do it and haven't done it yet. So welcome the benevolent galactic connection, because that's where the quantum jumps in our understanding are going to happen. But particularly focused on the healing technology, because, so many people have been so unwell in recent years. That's what kind of opens my heart to say, yeah, I want to understand that. I don't have any science background at all, but I want to understand that and at least be the person who shares that so others can benefit from it. I think that's a part of where I'm headed.
Yeah, what I'm being shown right now, it's crazy when you were saying that, is when we normally think of technology, we're thinking of something that is like a machinery or something physical, but I was just shown a human body, and that's literally the only technology that we need. And they're encouraging us, the galactics are encouraging us to understand that our human body is the technology for this healing, for this regeneration. So that just came through. I just wanted to drop that in there. But
absolutely, I would agree.
Pam Gregory.
I would agree with you, Emilio, because I think the external gadgets are interim, but they are teaching us to activate our own inner spiritual technology. Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, 100%.
Beautiful. And Pam Gregory, this is always a treat. This is always a gift, a pleasure, a joy. Thank you so much for the work that you do on the planet. Thank you so much for the collaborations that we've had, the friendship that we've created. It's such an honor to learn from you. absolutely love bathing in your energy. I know that everyone here is feeling the same. So thank you. And I can't wait to continue down the line and hopefully get to meet you in person someday
Bless
soon.
you, Emilio. I love and celebrate the work you are doing. It is extraordinary. It is unique. It is profound. So thank you a millionfold. You have many decades to go and you're just at the beginning. And thank you for everything you're doing, particularly for younger people. And it's just joyful to share with you. So bless you for this opportunity. Thank you. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Love to you all.